Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Tracy Howard. Again, I'm new to Student Aid Commission. I haven't started my position yet. So I can't really speak to the existing staffing needs. Janet can probably do that. But I can say, I know the positions, the money is allocated or looks to be allocated for a project manager, IV&V, and IPOC. And those are traditionally necessary to kick off a project, an IT project, and for the state of California. In order to plan, to do the procurement process, those positions are needed. So, I mean, I think I can speak to that. I can answer any questions on that for you.
For me, it's a priority issue, and I would love to see the money being spent on student aid. But I'm not opposed to the IT project. It's just I do have some concerns at this time.
Yeah. So those positions, those needs for a project manager, IPOR, and are necessary in order to do a procurement and to follow a normal process to kick off an IT project. So they're necessary. They're not something you can do without. And maybe Janet, you can talk to our existing projects. Existing staff.
Good afternoon, Janet McDuffie. Yeah, we've had a number of projects that we've had to do in the last few years, and so we've brought in contractors to do the Middle Class Scholarship, to do the California DREAM Act. It takes a lot of our internal staff working with those consultants to make sure the project gets up and running correctly. So while those staff who are experienced and understand our systems, we need to have backfill to keep our systems running. And so we do have to pull in a lot of people to make any project work. We're working closely with California Technology Agency on this project. They're putting us through a more extensive planning than used to be the case with the basic feasibility study report project. So we have their input in how we're moving forward with the planning. So we have a lot of oversight from that agency, along with their own commission, who will also be checking in on the project with us.
The other thing I'd like to offer to the member is that the system is already over 30 years old. And I used the word risk earlier to say just what I meant, which is if we don't replace the system, we are at a greater risk given the technology that has aged. We're already at capacity issues in terms of not being able to integrate our systems when the legislature asks us to do new programs and projects. So the Department of Finance, and we've spent over the last year being engaged in discussions about how best to do this and how to do it in a manner which will have success. So I think, what I would be reluctant to do if I couldn't do this any stronger than I can say this, is that it's just imperative at this point. We've been in the queue, if you will, waiting for additional dollars for a number of years. And we've done massive workarounds on a manual level to get the work done. The staff of the Student Aid Commission is one of the best staffs I've worked with in my 35-year career of higher education. We are in desperate need of getting this change. If we don't get this done, I cannot assure you that we will be able to deliver in the same manner that we have done in the past. We are a very effective agency. We're very mission-driven. We care about kids. Many of us were Cal Grant recipients ourselves. And this is extremely important that we get it done this year, just because of the workload that's involved. We can show you information regarding the number of students we serve and the number of programs we have. There's just this, we're doing as best a job we can, and if we don't get the system done, we're going to be falling behind. Students aren't going to get the information they need in a timely basis, and we're not going to be able to assure you that we can get the job done on time.
I would just like to offer also to echo Dinah's sentiments about the relationship, the working relationship we've tried to develop with the project. Additionally, if you have questions specific that might be really technical in nature to the project, the California Department of Technology is here at the hearing, so if you have something, if one of the members have any specific questions, feel free to inquire.
Mr. Ting? Thank you for coming today. I just wanted to echo my support for the project, but I also do share my colleagues' concerns. We've obviously had a very challenging track record of implementing technology projects, so while I echo your comments about the need and the importance of it, also I think we are cognizant that we have had challenging times completing those projects. So, but having said, I think we do need to proceed, and I think the request for the $840,000 at this initial step makes sense. I did want to touch base with you about the implementation of my bill 2160 from last year and how that's going. Really appreciated working with you on it, and obviously since that has a technology component, obviously we want to make sure that we support your efforts to implement technology to make that a reality.
I think what you're asking about is your bill that requires all high schools to upload the high school grade point average requirement that's required of all students who apply for the Cal Grant. And in terms of progress, this year will be the year that we need to focus on providing those resources to high schools. Some high schools will need more assistance than others in terms of their technology, because as you know, as we saw when we were trying to get the bill with you through the legislature, high schools sit in different places. So this is very important to that. We need to make sure that we have the technology and the way it's developing as it relates to the newest technologies. We have to be able to talk to all systems, and that's part of the issue here in terms of being able to have the resources to integrate with other systems.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? I think the big point is we'd like to see this project implemented successfully and stay out of the headlines as far as an IT project gone awry, but I know that's your priority number one.
Definitely.
So with that, I think we have a motion
I'd like
to
move to approve. Yeah.
as budgeted.
Was that going to be with my concerns about the 5-year time frame that she discussed or not?
So say it again, what you were suggesting, Mr. Chavez?
I'd actually take the LAO's recommendation that we put this at a 5-year time frame as was the term limited term, and have them come back and give a presentation on the status. Did I get that right?
If you approve the positions as limited term, I believe the limited term nature is 2-year limited term positions, and then they could be renewed for another 2 years if it was going to take 4 years, say. But the way the state does limited term positions, it's on a 2-year basis.
It's not a 5-year basis? Well, one of the issues we want to make sure we have competent people in there from day one, and sometimes you're not able to get individuals when you don't have certainty as far as how long they'll be there. Is that an issue?
We have heard concerns from departments about staffing limited term positions. That's true. Nonetheless, that's the sort of the system the state has set up for approving positions that are shorter term in nature. Let me take away the
limited term, because I agree with you. 2 years is going to be difficult to get anybody in there. So could we do not make this an ongoing revenue stream, looking to the staff for advice, not looking for an ongoing revenue stream forever, but put a requirement to come back either 3 to 5 years to see the status of it?
Have them report back in 3 years or on their position.
Talk to the mic.
We could certainly require a report back at any time frame that you want in terms of these positions and their organization as a whole.
That's what I think it'd be, because then we take care of the issue of long quality people in, but also deal with the issue of successful IT program meeting the needs, and it's not an ongoing revenue stream forever. Because once you build something, it's hard to ever get evaluated again. It's there forever.
If I could, I just wanted to point out that what you're voting on it's a 1-year proposal as part of the governor's budget, so it's really just funding for $840,000 and the 4 positions just for 15-16. So even though the project itself, at least projected, will be in out years, it's just that the positions aren't permanent for ongoing.
We'll have to come back next year and re-up these positions?
Correct, yeah.
So by taking this action, essentially, there are limited term positions?
I'm hearing that's not correct.
Yeah, Chris Leaf, Department of Finance. So when the project requires funding, which it will require funding in the future, the commission will be back in front of you asking for funding for the project, and that would be a good time to check back in on how the planning went.
Would that be next year or
Yeah,
a couple years down?
so.
Next year?
Next fall.
Okay. So with that, I know we have a suggestion. I think it probably makes sense to go as budgeted as the staff lays out in the analysis.
Yes, so moved.
Okay. Second, a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Ms. Kim?
No.
Mr. O'Donnell? Mr. Ting?
All right.
Okay, item
Staff
passes.
approves.
Okay, next item, issue number 5, financial aid outreach and loan assumption programs. Oh, I'm sorry, we missed one. Okay, excuse me. Back to item issue 4, SB 1028 implementation.
Sure. So issue number 4 in the governor's budget would provide $95,000 in one position to fulfill new responsibilities that were created by SB 1028. Now, Senate Bill 1028 expanded Cal Grant C eligibility and administration beginning in the 15-16 fiscal year. So established partnerships with statewide and local workforce investment boards, required changes to the existing scoring matrix, and revision of outreach materials in order to highlight programmatic changes that focus on the Cal Grants, focus Cal Grant C on assisting long-term unemployed. Thank you.
Okay, LAO?
We didn't have any concerns with this proposal.
Student Aid Commission?
No further comment other than this program, Cal Grant C, vocational students. This particular effort would have us partner and work with others to develop the scoring system and take a look at whether the appropriate mix of students are actually receiving the awards. So from a staffing perspective, as you've noted, you see our staffing situation. When this bill went through, we noted a cost to it during the bill process, and these funds were indicated as necessary in order to implement the legislation.
Okay. Thank you. Comments, questions from committee members?
I have a
Member Kim.
What happened to the position CSAC originally had for Cal Grant C program? The BCP says it was redirected. Can you tell me for what purpose it was redirected?
We took major reductions over the last decade, and we basically now have a situation where we have staff pulled out as needed. Positions were allocated back in the day, and now the Student Aid Commission uses those positions to run the entire Cal Grant program. So this is a new responsibility now being assigned to us. Catalina Missler, who runs the Program Administration and Services Division, is with me today if you want to talk position by position. The workload, again, as indicated by the number of dollars, and we also have the number of students, has increased significantly over that time frame.
No further question.
Okay. Do you want to respond?
If you'd like us to go through conversation about who's in the division, that typically something we can do here if you'd like. It's up to the chair.
Assembly member? No. Okay. With that, no more questions. We have a recommendation on this item.
Move to approve.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarty?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Ms. Kim? No. Mr. O'Donnell? Mr. Ting? Recommendation is approved.
Okay. Issue 5, funding for financial aid outreach and loan assumption programs. Department of Finance.
So the governor's budget provides $15 million in general fund to backfill the loss of the federal challenge grant, which expires at the end of the current fiscal year. So the challenge grant was used to partially fund the Apple program and fund the CalSOAP and the Cash for College programs. So consistent with the allocation of the challenge grant, the governor's budget provides $7.2 million for Apple, $7.2 million for CalSOAP, and then $328,000 for Cash for College, and then it's also $258,000 for state operations related to support of the Cash for College program.
Okay. LAO?
I'll I'll talk a little bit about each program. I'll go through them sequentially. If you turn to page 11, there's in your agenda, there's a chart that lists them. As Department of Finance mentioned, the first one is CalSOAP. This program is run by consortia that consist of K-12 school districts, community colleges, can be CSUs, UCs, private institutions. And the goal of the program is to provide college preparation services to high school students. So the services they provide are things like academic tutoring, SAT preparation, college and career counseling, helping students fill out their financial aid forms, things of that nature. In terms of funding for this program, as you heard, it's been funded, historically it was funded by the general fund. The state received a federal College Access Challenge grant a few years back, and so it's been using federal funds to support the program since then. That federal grant is expiring, so now you're being asked to resume general fund support for the program. One recommendation that we have is, since this program supports services for high school students, we believe that it should be funded within the Proposition 98 minimum guarantee. So school districts, for instance, perform similar types of services, getting students ready for college. All of that money counts towards Prop 98. So we're recommending that if you do want to resume general fund support, it's still general fund money, but you could count it towards the Prop 98 guarantee. Moving forward, we think you also should consider how this program relates to the local control funding formula. I believe one thing I forgot to mention about this program is it specifically targets low-income and first-generation high school students. And as you know, the local control funding formula is now allocating money largely based on student characteristics, including low-income status or English learner status. Moreover, as part of the local control accountability plans, the LCAPs, districts are now required to have accountability plans that relate to student achievement, including career and college readiness. So I think as a first step, you might want to consider funding this within Prop 98, because it is similar to other programs that serve high school students. And moving forward, you might want to consider the relationship between this program and what's being achieved through the LCFF and the LCAPs. With that said, we also wanted to provide a few comments on the program evaluation. Recently, CSAC released a draft evaluation of the program, and we applaud the Commission for taking the initiative to do an evaluation, which is provide some helpful information for you to learn about program outcomes. However, we found a few shortcomings with the evaluation. I'll just describe a couple of them briefly. One was it was evaluating whether or not students who received services from the program actually went on to enroll in college. And one concern just with the methodology was it was surveying students in their senior year of high school and saying, do you plan to attend college, and counting that as sort of a successful outcome. But we don't know if those students actually went on to enroll in college. They just are saying in their senior year, yes, I'm going to go, or no, I'm not going to go. So I think to strengthen the evaluation, moving forward, we have a couple of similar ideas to improve the methodology that the Commission has used that we think could provide some better information. I think the initial evaluation is a reasonable start looking at this program. And so regardless of whether you take our recommendation to fund it with Prop 98 or not, we would recommend that you require the Student Aid Commission to report annually certain outcome data, and we'd be happy to work with the Commission and committee staff and Department of Finance to determine exactly what that would look like. But we do think there could be some improvements to the existing evaluation that was done.
Okay. Student Aid Commission?
I have copies of the initial evaluation that the Commission did that I'll give to the sergeant if the members like to see it. For those of you who are familiar with the CalSOAP program, you know that it has a very long history, and for those of you who don't, it was a legislative bill that was carried by Assemblymember Vic Fazio at that point to provide for college readiness in incomes areas where college going was not prevalent. The program, and as you know, college counseling was dramatically reduced during the recession. Currently, the number of high school counselors is 941 to 1 in California. where the Association of School Counselors recommend a ratio of 250 to 1. The national average is 471 to 1. This program, as well as our Cash for College program, is the backbone of what the Student Aid Commission does in terms of outreach to communities. As the analyst has indicated, federal challenge grant funds were used over the last 7 and almost 8 years now, the time of the grant, to continue to provide these services to very needy schools. Our Cash for College and our CalSO programs, and for those of you who aren't familiar, the consortiums themselves represent high schools, community colleges, UC, CSUs, as well as private nonprofit institutions. They organize themselves in regions. They provide tutorial services to high schools to help students be not only tutored in academic subjects where they're having difficulty, but mentoring as well. These services over the last 35 years have proven that they work to increase the college going rates. Students who go through a CalSOAP experience have better college going rates than the county college going rates. When the California Post-Secondary Education Commission was in effect, there were studies done then, as there have been some studies now with some of the resources that we have been able to garnish from the Commission's budget to focus on looking at that rate, and that rate has remained consistent over time, that this really does add value, particularly in schools where they have insufficient counseling. So I wanted to encourage you to continue funding for this program. We have 14 regional consortium directors who can testify in each of their areas about what value it adds. I would note that 1/3 of the funding that goes to CalSOAP goes directly back to college students. It goes back to them in either college work study or student assistantship grants, where they work in the high schools to do that tutoring, to do that mentoring. The remaining of the resources goes to provide services in the high schools to those students who would like to pursue either career or college opportunities.
Okay. Questions or comments from committee members on these items? Mr. Chavez?
Looking at your chart that you handed out on page 14, the CalSOAP college going rates,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm happy to see San Diego's doing well. But what strikes me odd, because I'm very concerned, sitting in a lot of education committees, you always see, the issues in Los Angeles. We only have 16 students compared to San Diego has 2,509 in the program. Why is that so poor?
Well, Assemblymember Weber raised this issue in committee the other day in terms of the participation rate of students in Cash for College and CalSOAP events, and so we're going to be looking at this. I know that this particular program goes back until the early 1980s when I was on the legislative staff of Assemblymember Peter Chacon, representing that particular area. And so I know in this particular district, they coordinate their activities with the guidance counselors. And so it's one of the issues we're going to be looking at in terms of San Diego. The Commission has expressed that its interest of looking at the regions as the legislature determines funding for this program. Each of these programs gets a grant from the Commission that has to be matched dollar for dollar. And it also has to be focused on areas where there is a need in terms of the student population. So this is one area that we'll look at as we move forward.
Wow, I thought you just said we're messing up, because the need is clearly there.
Well, the need is clearly there.
We have 16 students in the entire Los Angeles area.
Well, we don't have a large program in Los Angeles. We have a huge area in Los Angeles, but it would only represent a certain area of Cal State Los Angeles as an example, versus in San Diego, where we actually work with the guidance department for San Diego Unified School District. We're not in your outlying areas. Each of these programs don't represent the full geographic area of San Diego or Los Angeles. They typically, the consortium will define their region.
That speaks to the LAO's discussion about making this part of local control funding, because that would be something that parents would be involved in.
They can help us assist and leverage more resources as well.
If I could add, the program does serve a relatively small number of students. So so to start with, there's a map on page 8 of the report that you have. The program only serves students sort of in the immediate area of where you see those stars. So there's large swaths of the state that aren't even being served by this program. I think the report notes that I believe there were 25,000 high school students that got direct services through the program, things like tutoring and counseling. In comparison, the state had 2 million high school students, including about 1.1 million low-income high school students. So it is reaching a relatively small number of students to date.
Well, I know this is just for information, so when it comes back, we're going to look at it. But I think the local control funding is a good issue. The 98 sounds like something that's probably doable. But I've read enough charts to know something happened. Because if you look at 2009 in Los Angeles, 434 students were involved in it. And 2 years later, you got 16. So something happened.
Mr.
So I look forward to discussing this later, because I think you have some great examples of you're trying to help kids. I mean, obviously your numbers are pretty, it's a successful program, and we need to help children be successful as any way we can. So,
State Aid Commission?
Angela Williams, Legislative Director. I really appreciate your comments, Assemblymember Chavez. I think the thing that needs to be put into perspective as far as CalSOAP and Cash for College is concerned is that, again, I think the comment about the ratio of counselor to student is important, because we're looking at areas where there's large disparities in terms of outreach. And CalSOAP, particularly because it organizes itself as a consortium with K-12, with CSU, with UC, is probably the only external source where students can actually get that. The reason why we have low numbers in terms of those participating is because we only have 14 CalSOAPs throughout the district, or throughout the entire state of California. We would love to have 40 CalSOAPs. If we had 40 CalSOAPs, like senatorial districts, then we would be able to reach more. I think what we're asking you is particularly for a modest amount of funding to continue what has been done. But the conversation in the legislature, particularly at the Assembly Higher Ed Committee yesterday, was about how do we expand this to particular areas. We had a good conversation with the chairman about we need to find more and better ways in terms of outreach. We need to actually take the platform that CalSOAP and Cash for College has built over 30 years and expand it and deepen it. You're reading the numbers right. You're reading the numbers absolutely right. We can do more, we want to do more, and we actually need more than this allocation prescribes right now. And we'd love to work with you and all of the Assembly members and senators just to really make CalSOAP and Cash for College regionally representative, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the idea is, if you look at what has happened, and you look at the disparity amongst those that are going to college, they are not going to college, one, because the college-going culture is not implemented. I think the major problem around Prop 98 funding is that we don't really want to get into a fight around Prop 98 funding. I think that's another fight for other groups. I think that what we're trying to do is to expand, but I also think that we're already working with K-12 in the consortiums to expand outreach for those underserved students that need to go to college.
but so I understand your structure, though. When you have 14 consortiums, how many people are in a consortium, or is it one person responsible for three? What's the structure of it?
We can speak to that. There's typically a governing board. Let's give you an example here in Solano County. The governing board at that particular one is East Bay Consortium, and so it's out of UC Berkeley. So the University of California at Berkeley serves as the fiscal agent. Then we have Solano Community College. We have the community colleges in the East Bay. We'll have Mills College. We'll have Holy Names. There are approximately, I think, in that particular consortium, anywhere from 15 to 18 folks, and we'll look at that for you. But typically, we have the governing boards representing the institutional leadership as well as the K-12 schools that are being served by that consortium. And Dr. Williams is right. Part of this is it's a focused effort, it's a targeted effort at certain high schools, those high schools that don't have access to services. They tend to be in low-income and working-class areas where there are insufficient counselors. So the numbers here don't speak to the total reach. What we're looking in those particular charts at is those students who are getting intensive services versus services that are general services. There are a lot more students that get access to CalSOAP services than are demonstrated in that chart. That chart shows those students who are actually getting intensive services, which means the full array of services. And so there are two types of students, if you will, who are getting services by the consortium. So it goes from everywhere from that particular high school receiving the tutoring, the mentoring, to other schools only receiving access to college preview days, financial aid nights, counseling nights, those kinds of things.
But, so it's a consortium, and you bring all these people in, you do all these great things. How many paid staff members from your group run a consortium?
Our folks in Sacramento don't staff the individual regions.
We don't fund any people in
the regions.
Your East Bay?
The regions are hired by the fiscal agent. So at UC Berkeley, they work for the University of California, Berkeley, through a fiscal agreement with them. And the size of the staff depends on their budget. At East Bay, as an example, they are very successful in matching local dollars. Their total budget is over $1 million. So they will have a director and they will have staff that work in the high schools. Plus, they'll have 1/3 of that money go back to students through work study or through student assistantships.
So what's it in Los Angeles? What's their budget?
Los Angeles is one of the lower ends. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about $365,000. They're one of the smaller projects, unfortunately, even though the demand is very great in LA. San Diego is another big project in that area. It's over $1 million.
I can tell. Thank you.
And Los Angeles is just another area that's ripe for expansion. I mean, the idea is that we have some statistics, we have some structure that's there. The key thing is to looking at exactly what you're saying. There are certain things that need to be improved. Let's improve and expand, as opposed to thinking that we're serving a small population that doesn't need college-going culture or college-going experiences.
Okay. Any other members? Okay, I have some issues to bring up here. First, just overall on the CalSOAP program, I know it's been in effect for nearly 40 years, right?
5.
Since I know Vic Fazio was this district actually here in Sacramento. And, you know, I think one thing to show that the test of time is in the late 90s after Prop 209, SP1, and the precipitous decline in underrepresented students at the university system. There's a huge effort to focus on more outreach programs, and a bunch came up, and this one stood. And so I think this just shows that this one really has made a difference in our state as far as helping, many times, like you said, Mr. Williams, first-generation families navigate the college maze. It's certainly complicated. These high school counselors, they're dealing with sometimes life and death issues at high school campuses. Don't have time to talk about FAFSA, financial aid, grants, loans, and the works. And so, you know, I would like to see that, and this really relates to the issues coming up. And, you know, well, not to jump forward, but we talk about how the entitlement is one program, and there's so many students who apply for the competitive grant, and once you apply for the competitive grant, your odds are 1 in 10 of getting the grant. Well, if more people knew about it up front, they would be applying for the entitlement grant. That may put cost pressure on the Department of Finance for the entitlement. But with that said, there was a request by the Student Aid Commission, a BCP, to increase the number of consortium dealing with the issue that Mr. Chavez mentioned, that some areas just don't have the depth of activity, and wanted to ask Department of Finance, you know, what your thoughts were about that, and potentially, you know, with a few new dollars in the budget, possibly with the May revise, is it something that we think would be warrant a discussion to increase?